Stop, everyone. I have just had a precognitive vision of the future where I watched Madam Web with all of you. And I have to warn you that Madam Web is a movie. Wait, are you here to tell us that the movie is bad? Yes, the movie is bad.
So we shouldn't go see it?
No. Well, some of you shouldn't go see it, but the movie is bad in a way that some of you will appreciate how bad it is. So do you know which one of us liked it and which of us don't? No, I do not. The vision did not include your individual feedback. Yo, your precognitive powers seem hella whack and not useful at all in this situation. I'm sorry I don't have full control of my precognitive powers yet. My soul hasn't been Doctor Stranged out of my body into a spider people birthing pool. What? See? If you'd seen the movie, you'd know what I was talking about. And welcome back to Ruben Uncut. Because today, I'm here to talk to you about the movie Madam Web. Which is, honestly, I don't know what the hell it is. Actually, that's not true. What I should be expressing to you is, for the majority of watching the movie, I didn't know what the hell it was. So let me explain some things. First of all, yes, this is another bad Sony Spider-Man movie. I'm going to get into that. That being said, nothing prepared me for Madam Web. Not really. Allow me to elaborate. You see, a couple years ago, we had a bad Marvel movie called Morbius. Now, the thing about Morbius is that Morbius was not good, but Morbius was bad in a way that is easy to understand. It is outdated junk food. Something a person could feel vaguely nostalgic for if they grew up watching superhero movies in the early 2000s before we learned how to make superhero movies. You know, before movies like The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, The Avengers, all of these movies came to pass. Except, of course, Morbius came to pass after those movies, making it a strange, dated, almost throwback of a movie. But it was easy to understand. And let me be clear, I'm not saying that Madam Web is hard to follow. I never felt confused by the actual story. Well, kind of. We'll get into that. What confused me about Madam Web was what kind of movie I was watching. And it took me a really long time to piece it together. And I would say that the kind of movie Madam Web is falls into two distinctive categories of, oh, what the fuck. On the one hand, Madam Web is the MCU formula taken to what Hollywood seems to view as its extreme. Recently, there has been a sentiment going around that for some reason, every character in a superhero movie should have an origin story, or at least a solo movie to get the audience on board with that character, even if that character is a supporting character. And in the comic books, Madam Web is definitely a supporting character. So who is Madam Web? Well, in the comic books, Madam Web is a mutant. Yes, like X-Men mutants. She is a precognitive mutant who is born with a terrible disease, which, am I going to try to pronounce this? Myasthenia gravis is supposedly the disease she has. Oh, it's a real disease. It's a long-term neuromuscular junction disease that leads to varying degrees of skeletal muscle weakness. The most commonly affected muscles are those of the eyes, face, and swallowing. It can result in double vision, drooping eyelids, and difficulty in talking and walking. Now that's important, you may notice here, because in this image from the comics, she is in a wheelchair / life support system. This web around her is the life support system. She is, in fact, a hero born with a genetic disability. Although, to be fair, Madam Web is a little bit more of a true neutral character in the comics. Nah, probably neutral good. I don't know. I haven't actually read much with Madam Web. I've only seen occasional appearances. Wait, that's who he was supposed to be? What? Okay, that's weird as hell. All right. So, like I was saying, the extreme MCU unification of storytelling, saying that every character needs to have a solo movie before we can do anything with them, is a brain disease that is rotting American audiences' minds, specifically MCU fans. Like, it's bizarre. Like, some of the complaints that people have against movies these days is just like, what the hell are you talking about? Darth Vader is in 7 minutes of A New Hope, and yet we remember him so much. You don't need whole movies to get us into characters. And this is quite the tale. You see, because I have to say, on one hand, it is that thing I said, the MCUification of storytelling to an extreme, an unnecessary extreme. That being said, it's also the weird type of storytelling we don't get in movies. Not normal. You see, this is the type of story, the type of weird, twisted storytelling choices that could only be made in comic books. These types of experimental options are normally things reserved for storytellers in comic books because comic books don't cost millions of dollars to make. They are, in fact, incredibly cheap to make, which is actually how the industry has survived well past their golden age when they sold millions of copies regularly. This is that type of weird storytelling, and that kind of appeals to me. That being said, this movie is kind of insane. So let's just get right into it. And I'm going to try to untangle the absurd interweaving of different Spider-Man elements throughout the film, because I looked into some of this and it's fucking nuts. Okay, first of all, so the movie starts off in the Amazon, where Madam Web's pregnant mother is researching this spider. A spider that, we don't know this yet, but they believe will cure their child's, that disease I said earlier. They haven't been born yet, but they have been diagnosed with it. So she's here trying to, that's a huge spoiler, by the way, but let's just move through it. So she's here in the Amazon trying to find that spider to do that thing. The person helping her look for it is a guy named Ezekiel Sims. Now, this is where things start to get twisted almost immediately, because this version of Ezekiel Sims is clearly, and I mean clearly, like, this is the thing, he's two different Spider-Man characters mashed into one of whom is Ezekiel Sims, or Zeke Sims, who is a wealthy businessman who hired detectives so that he could steal Spider-Man's powers, essentially. But he's combined with another guy who I'm pretty sure, I'm going to double check this. As I was saying, appears to be a combination of Ezekiel Sims and Black Tarantula. Or at least one version of Black Tarantula. I might actually be naming the wrong Spider-Man villain here, but let's get back to it. So Ezekiel Sims, who is a combination of these two Spider-Man villains, basically murders Madam Web's mother and steals the spider she was looking for so he can gain its powers and, you know, be like Spider-Man, except Spider-Man hasn't been born yet because it's the 70s. Anyways, while she's dying, Madam Web's mother is saved by the erroneous, I can't remember, there's some Central American spider people. There are too many Marvel characters called the Tarantula. I've looked it up, and I'm not happy about it. But that's besides the point. Anyways, these spider people who I was hoping to find more information on, because it sounds familiar, but it's apparently not easily Googleable, rescue Madam Web's mom. And I can't lie to you, this this was the moment that started blowing my mind because it's so fucking ridiculous. And the CGI for it looks terrible. It is the kind of instant, holy shit, I don't know if mainstream audiences are going to be able to hold on for this part type of thing. And the movie throws it at you in the first 10 minutes. It's wild. But anyways, the spider people, actually, wait, maybe that's how I can find out. That's interesting and weird. Okay, so Las Aran, these spider people are from the comics. And yes, the character I was thinking of that is combined with Ezekiel Sims is one of the versions of Tarantula. Weirdly enough, another character in this movie who is not shown getting her powers in that manner is apparently one of these people, or gets her powers from one of these people. I don't know. The point is this. It's insane. But so they take Madam Web's mother, they inject her with the spider venom, and Cassandra Webb is born in this weird spiritual pool that the spider people have. Then, and I mean then, we are transported to 2003, I think. It might have been 2002. Point is, it takes place in the early 2000s, where Cassandra Webb is now, hold on for this, a paramedic in New York. Despite the fact that she was born in Peru, she's a paramedic in New York who is working with, get this, Ben Parker, Peter Parker's future uncle and adoptive father figure, played by Scott Adams. Adam Scott? Adam Scott. Whichever one is from Parks and Rec. One of them is the guy who made Dilbert and sucks, and the other guy's from Parks and Rec, and he's cool. I'm sorry. Their names are too similar. But the point is that he is honestly, I like him in the movie. But this is where the movie starts to get weird and shit, right? Okay? Because here's the thing. There is a Spider-Man in this movie, technically. Technically, Spider-Man appears in this movie. Not with any powers or anything, and he's certainly not played by any actor you've ever seen play him before. Can you guess what I'm saying? Let's move on. So anyways, there's a whole bunch of shtick going on. Ben and Cassandra have a whole deal. They're like work buddies, but he is revealed that he's in love with someone named May Parker, who we don't meet in the movie, but we do meet his sister, Mary Parker, who is pregnant with this guy, this foot right here, Spider-Man. She's pregnant with Spider-Man. There, got it. Here, played by a person I'm normally used to seeing play psychopaths. I forget her name, but she's from the American Horror Stories series. Anyways, throughout the course of this time, so basically, at a certain point, Cassandra drowns in a rescue operation, and Ben brings her back to life. Upon bringing her back to life, she now has precognitive powers, which a movie does a decent job at initially demonstrating this to us and how she can affect change. Not bad. Ezekiel Sims, who is part tarantula, part Ezekiel Sims, meanwhile, at the same time, is living in the world being haunted by visions of being murdered by 3 spider women. And he is convinced that he can steal NSA technology to find these people. Note the fact the movie never addresses the NSA woman that he kills. Like, you'd think that someone with that high level of security clearance going missing would be an issue, and that when she went missing, her security clearance would probably no longer be recognized or would be assumed stolen. But that never happens. But Ezekiel Sims' goal is to hunt down 3 spider women. And this is actually one of the interesting things about the movie, because it takes 3 spider women from the comics and it changes them a little bit for some reason. But we'll get into that. So essentially, she starts having visions where Tarantula is fucking murdering these teenage girls. The teenage girls are, of course, Julia Cornwall, played by Sydney Sweeney. Now, in the comic books, this character's name is not Cornwall, but Carpenter. Don't know why this change has been made. No idea why this has happened. The important things about this character is that in the comics, Julia Carpenter will eventually become the next Madam Web. She will gain her powers. Although Madam Web will also come back to life after that in the comics, but it's not important for this movie at all. If you hadn't guessed, 99% of the movie she is not in a wheelchair. Because this disease she has here has been cured by that spider bite. Because, of course, you know, which kind of makes sense because she can't be a mutant. It's really actually impressive how many different weird Spider-Man threads they tie together in this insanity to create her character. However, I want to say, is there a reason we couldn't create a compelling storyline around Madam Web being actually disabled? I mean, I understand she couldn't be a mutant. Oh, it is Adam Scott. Scott Adams is the guy who created Dilbert. I'm looking at it now. Where was I? Right. So Sydney Sweeney plays Julia Cornwall, aka Julia Carpenter, who is one of the Spider Women from the comic books. Isabella Merced? Not sure. Plays Anya Corazon, who in the comics gets her powers from the Las Arañas. Not sure where her powers are supposed to come from here, but I'll get into that in a minute. And Celeste O'Connor as Mattie Franklin. Interestingly enough, this is one of the two out of three of the Spider Women here actually do have a connection to Madam Web. They're weird connections. But Anya Corazon is actually not one of them. In the comics, they aren't quite connected. In the comics, Anya is actually connected to the Las Arañas. Do you see how I'm saying they like really made a complex web out of a bunch of different, disparate Spider-Man threads? It's wild how much Spider-Man mythology they just sort of like interconnected throughout the film with barely having any Spider-Man in the movie. But eventually, you know, she catches on to it, and the next thing she knows, she's accidentally kidnapping these three teenage girls to protect them from Tarantula, aka Ezekiel Sims, who becomes aggressively, like, more frustrated by the fact that they are overcoming his NSA level of surveillance through her precognition. That being said, if there's one thing in this movie I'm not sure how to feel about, it is definitely Tahar Rahim's Ezekiel Sims. He sounds a little weird. His intonation is a little strange. I feel bad saying that because I feel like I might be picking on someone whose first English language isn't English. But his delivery is strange. And sometimes feels like maybe it was re-recorded. I don't know. Also, he reminds me of a comedic actor, and it was kind of distracting, like appearance-wise. And I can't put my finger on who it is he reminds me of. Driving me crazy. But the thing his character does have going for him is he has kind of like a Greek tragedy thing going on, where like he's trying to prevent a thing, but inexplicably kind of creates the thing. That being said, a thing that annoys me about this, I'll get to it later. Let's move along. So, first of all, on the plus, in the visions where the Spider Women are shown, their costumes are fucking bitching. Like, they actually nailed these costumes from the comics. It's impressive. That being said, they only appear in these costumes in visions. That's right. I'm going to spoil this for you. The movie teases these girls as spider people the whole movie, but they only ever appear as spider people in visions. It's honestly quite blue-balling. But let's get back to it. So they're on the run. Things keep happening. Madam Web keeps struggling with whether or not she wants to assume responsibility for protecting these spider girls. Ezekiel gets more and more pissed off, and eventually, it all, of course, comes to a rip-roaring conclusion. That being said, there's some shit in here that's wild. For starters, there's one scene right in the middle of the movie where I would be fucked if I told you what exactly was happening. What appears to be happening is that Madam Web has a precognition of going to a place and potentially either hallucinating a conversation with real useful information or actually meeting with an out-of-costume Ezekiel Sims so that he can just explain what is happening to her. And then, of course, it's a precog, so she goes back, and then she doesn't do any of that and just uses the information from it. And that scene, I'm not going to lie, if you're an average viewer and that scene happens and you're suddenly like, what the fuck is happening? I couldn't blame you, because that's the type of weird B-movie shit that this movie is built on. And there lies the rub. Because you see, this actually unlocked a piece of understanding. Suddenly, these Sony movies make sense. They're not trying to make grade A superhero movies. They're making grade B superhero movies. And I don't mean like I would give this movie a B if I was rating it. Probably not good enough for that. But this itself, by definition, is a B movie. It doesn't make entirely sense. And you kind of have to just shut off your brain and be ready to laugh at its cheesiness, its camp, and its ridiculous moments. If you can do that, you might actually appreciate Madam Web. But this is not just true of Madam Web. This is true of any Sony movie that is not currently into the Spider-Verse, which is chef's kiss, grade A material. But the Venoms, Morbius, this, and I'm sure Kraven the Hunter are B movies. And I mean that in the distinctive, it's cheesy, it's trashy. Some people will enjoy it and other people will roll their eyes and be like, why? That's the kind of movie this is. You have to be ready to go in not expecting it to be good to enjoy it. Because I'll be honest, I was never bored during this movie. I actually kind of enjoyed it. Not because it's good, but because it's ridiculous. Emma Roberts, that's who plays Mary Parker. I remembered the name. Okay. Because Madam Web is that kind of movie. In fact, honestly, the major mistake that Sony has made is not embracing the exploitative nature of B movies. What would have made Morbius better is if it embraced its own ridiculousness. If it had gallons of spurting blood and gore. In fact, the only thing that's missing from Madam Web from being like a classic, like 1980s, like horror movie is the exploitative factors of, gratuitous gore. Now, exploitatively, there are actually like multiple precognitive scenes of a man in a spider costume just straight up murdering teenage girls. If this movie had the framework is there for like weird 80s horror movie elements combined with, some exploitative things. Like if the girls were guaranteed to be 18, I don't think they ever say their age, and like their tits were flopping out, this would be a exploitation movie from the late 70s, early 80s. That's what this movie would be. The movie is not exploitative in that way. I just want to be clear. Arguably, the movie sexualizes the teenage girls in the same way that Hollywood always sexualizes teenage girls by dressing them to be hot. But it never reaches that B movie levels of, hey, their tits are flopping out. Because it can't, because it's PG-13. And also, we live in an age where, like, honestly, the movie's target audience is probably girls. And you know what? I don't have a problem with that. In fact, honestly, I kind of enjoyed the foursome of them. That poor choice of words, considering the last conversation which went on. But Madam Web and her three apprentices here have a decent chemistry that I don't hate. Frankly, I'm just hoping that Kraven the Hunter, though, does embrace this and is full of gore and titties. Let's do it. Let's just agree that these Sony movies are what they are. Trashy junk food. Something for only the hardcore Spider-Man fans to sit and laugh at and eat popcorn and mock while they pick out the obscure Spider-Man references throughout it. If you like cheesy, campy stuff, you might actually enjoy this. Just don't expect it to be good. Expect it to be tasty little junk food that doesn't always make sense. Oh, we got to talk about the ending. Yeah, the ending. So, if you want to see the movie, I recommend stopping now, but it doesn't really matter because you know what? It's a cheesy B movie. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it, or you're going to love it because you hate it, or you're going to love to hate it, or you're going to hate to love it. The point is that that's the kind of movie it is. I have no doubt there are people who will enjoy this. I can't tell you who those people are. They don't watch good movies. But they also don't watch good movies on purpose. I mean, they might watch good movies. The point is they watch bad movies on purpose. There, said it right. Let's continue. So the end of this movie is bajonkers. Kind of. Sort of. So the final fight scene, they lure Tarantula to a goddamn fireworks factory that was on fire earlier in the movie. They start dropping road flares throughout it, setting off the fireworks, which make it a hell of a job for Tarantula to chase them. They go up onto the roof where they have a final confrontation. There's a moment at the end where Tarantula, aka Ezekiel Sims, is like, hey, you can't save all three of them. You're gonna have to choose. And then she uses her powers of connection to the multiverse, because that's how her precognitive powers work, to save all three of them at once by enacting three different possible outcomes at once. It makes very little sense and is kind of ridiculous. But the thing is that the movie ends with her killing Ezekiel Sims. Like, flat out crushing him. And the thing is that means that his vision of the Spider Women killing him never comes to pass, which means we never see them as the Spider Women except in one final parting shot of their team of four. You see, because this is essentially because at the end of the movie, she is blinded by fireworks and is put in a wheelchair by her accident. She does get kind of this cool costume. The movie's not bad at costumes. In fact, actually, that was the first thing I noticed is like, that's a weird version of the tarantula costume, isn't it? It's not a specific tarantula costume. They sort of like merged them and made them more Spider-Man-like. Arguably, they could have made this movie so that Ezekiel Sims was more of a Jason figure, but it also kind of ruins that by giving us too much of him. But that's besides the point. Let's get back to the ridiculous ending. So the movie ends with them all in the hospital, and she basically adopts these three girls because their lives are terrible and their parents don't give a shit. Have been deported. And there's the movie. And it ends with a final shot of them all in their full costumes. So how does this movie connect to the Spider-Verse? No fucking idea. The movie makes zero attempts to do a full tie-in. In fact, the thing that might be most insane about Madam Web is the idea that it would be standalone. That it is, because to view it as standalone is to view its storytelling and universe-based choices the same way that I view them in a movie like The Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. That would be the comparison. It's not a favorable comparison because this is B-movie schlock. And Joker is like Oscar bait schlock. So, like, that's insane in itself. Because the thing that's insane about the movie is that it exists. This isn't normally what we would see in movies. They grabbed the wheelchair support character and were like, let's give them their own movie. A movie explaining them, their powers, and all that. And then they just desperately tried to piece as much Spider-Man lore without including Spider-Man as they could around that. And that's insane. That's the kind of insanity you don't normally see in movies. Because like I was saying earlier, this is the kind of bizarre storytelling choices that are typically made in comic books. Why? Because comic books are so cheap, they are normally allowed to be this experimental. In fact, if anything, I kind of love that this movie exists. I'm not saying it's good, but I love that the studios actually at every moment said, yes, let's. And just yes-anded this thing all the way into production and into theaters. Oh, by the way, Spider-Man gets born at the end of the movie. Just throwing that out there. He's a baby. Actually, one of the cutest lines in the movie is actually probably been super excited about being an uncle. All the fun and none of the responsibility. And Madam Web chuckles and goes, that's what he thinks because she's already seen the future where he adopts Spider-Man. Is that baby Tom Holland? I don't know. Could be. Is this in the MCU? I don't know. If it was, it'd be weird. Is that baby Andrew Garfield? Is that baby Tobey Maguire? We don't know. Because the movie never bothers to fully connect itself to anything. In fact, actually, the idea that a Madam Web movie would be standalone is actually, I will repeat this, the most insane thing this movie could be. Madam Web has a connection to the Spider-Verse and the multiverse, so like it would make sense for her to tie into something. But it doesn't seem to, or does it? I don't know. The movie never clarifies any of that. In fact, honestly, the connections to the characters are, as best described, like Joker. Like, it's going out of its way not to portray Batman, and everything inside of it takes place a ridiculous amount of time before Batman becomes Batman. Because, I mean, the implication would be is that by the time Spider-Man is Spider-Man in this universe, these teenage girls would be in their late 20s, early 30s, which is a huge jump. In fact, arguably, this movie is set too far back in time. But that's only important if it ends up connecting to anything, and I don't know if it will. And the fact it's not getting good reviews, so I don't expect it to. Yeah. Is it good? Oh, no. No, it's not. Is it bad? Yeah. But kind of in an entertaining and endearing, ridiculous way. Does it make sense? I didn't come here for a movie that makes sense. Well, thank you for tuning into these wild ramblings on a wild movie. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, and, if you want to contact the show, you can email me at rubenuncut@gmail.com. Also, have a fantastic and have an amazing whatever, wherever, whenever, whoever, however you are.